Hey, everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Hot Rod BBQ podcast. I am here with Jeff O'Neill, the founder of the Velocity Invitational that's held at WeatherTech Laguna Seca Raceway up here in Northern California. It is turning out to be one of the premier events in the United States. Having attended it a few times myself, I can attest to its legitimacy and just kind of overall fun of the event. So, Jeff, how you doing, man? Thank you so much for coming on.
I am good. We're coming up on our event in about 3 weeks, so everything's coming together.
So tell me a little bit about tell us a little bit about the event as a whole, and then we'll go into how how you got started in it, why you saw the need for it, and so on.
Well, look, well, all we're trying to do is we're trying to bring great cars. We're trying to bring great, amazing cars out of collections that have a tendency to stay hidden in a garage. And we wanted to create a forum where people can come out, feel comfortable, show off their cars, race them if they so desire, which is our preference, because one of the fundamentals that I say a lot is if you can't see it, smell it, and hear it, it's not a race car.
No.
And seeing them in a static environment honestly is great. I mean, you can polish them all up, but I think the spectator wants to see that car as it would have appeared in period, whether it's 1938 or 1968. So that's been the goal from the beginning, is to create a great environment where guys with amazing cars, and that doesn't mean just the huge private collections. There's a lot of people out there with 1 or 2 great cars, and they love bringing them, but they want to bring them in an environment where they can run them and bring their family.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, having grown up on the East Coast, growing up in New York and New York City, Brooklyn, and around the boroughs, seeing all these great vintage race cars on now defunct channels like Speed Vision and all these stuff back in the day when you saw these vintage races, it was something that was so foreign to me, but something that captivated my imagination as a kid. So we would see all the Trans Am cars, we would see all the Bugattis, we'd see all the vintage Ferraris, and occasionally you would get a glimpse to actually see them perform under their own power at classic vintage races. Having moved to Northern California, having attended events like Pebble Beach, having attended now the Velocity Invitational that was, started at Sonoma Raceway, transforms the experience. And that's, I think, one of the things that I really want to focus on is how you're bringing that vintage experience to the general public in a way that is kind of not only captivating them, but elevating events like this to the next level. It's really spectacular.
Well, our goal from the beginning has been to make sure that people have a place to bring these cars and feel comfortable. What has happened with vintage racing is it became a game of how many cars can I get on the track and just collect a fee. And no offense to all those guys, they do a great job.
Sure.
I mean, some of my greatest pals are running those events. However, if you happen to have a $55 million car, you don't necessarily want that in a grid with, 48 cars and, it's mixed up. The grids aren't correct. The cars aren't period any longer. So what I was trying to do is be very disciplined. How do we bring these cars back? Because if you go back to the really early days of when Steve Earle kind of created the historics, I mean, there would be 4, 5, 6 GTOs, 3 or 4 short wheelbases, Testarossas. Right. All the guys would bring them out and run them. Now, granted, they weren't worth quite as much as they are today, but those guys, they started bringing them and saying, I'm not coming to an event where, A, I don't know the drivers, B, too many cars. And the experience, it's just not spectacular. And I wanted to create an environment where you could bring your family, your girlfriend, your wife, your friends, your business friends, your old friends, what have you, and have great food, wine, and then really though have an environment where these guys can bring their spectacular cars. And what I saw happening over the last 15 years is all the great cars are staying in garages. So my
Mhm.
job is to talk to all those guys, and they love it. They love, wanting to bring their cars out. They want those special, the GTO Special, which we'll have this
Sure.
year. They want to bring. I'll be running Tom Price's Ferrari GTO. He is one of the legendary guys in our business that brings cars out because he knows people love
Right.
to see them at speed.
So you touched on really quick, wine and food, right? And when you go to events like this, right, that is such a big part of the experience. The first event that you had at Sonoma, at the Sonoma Festival of Speed, you had a wonderful uh tent that was set up for wine and food, but then more importantly, you also had a very interesting thing. You had a play area for kids and
Right.
families, which I had yet to see at an event. And I mean, I've gone to some of the biggest events out there, right? I've driven just about every racetrack in the United States. Um, and to see something like that, that was so welcoming to people, I think it was the first time I'd actually seen that here in the United States. And it was interesting because we were walking around and I was like, this is such a spectacular idea, because now families could come, the kids could have something to do, spouses could have something to do. There was wonderful food, wonderful wine, wonderful scenery. And how did that come about from your actual business?
Well, I'm partly in the hospitality business because we have wineries in Sonoma, we have Ramsgate, we have Robert Hall in the Central Valley, or in Paso Robles. So we love to entertain, and we like to give people great food. I mean, the joke around our household is, what do you talk about at lunch? And it's what we're going to
Yeah,
have for
dinner.
dinner. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's important, and that has been lost on a lot of this racing. And my guys, my team all hear me talk about it. I say, you walk into the paddock, it looks like everybody unloaded with a stick of dynamite. And
Yeah.
how do you expect to educate? How does a young person learn when they walk in and there's one car completely taken apart, one's kind of put back together, they're not in the same grid. So
Right.
we're trying to bring an environment where people can learn. So we were the first ones in the US, as you're probably aware, and I can't take credit for this, I've got to give it to Charles March at Goodwood, but we put all the cars in the grid that they would have raced in with the history in front of them. So you can walk down past 26 cars, know what their Trans Am history was, or
Yep.
their Le Mans history, or Nürburgring, or what have you. And the goal here is, how do you entertain, but at the same time, these tracks all thought, serving good food was, just a burned hot dog on the side of the road. And
No.
that's nowhere to sit, nowhere to have a lovely, I mean, look, we're not getting too crazy about the food, but we wanted an environment where couples could come and they could watch a race, or they could see one of their friends race, and then
Yeah.
come sit down, chill out, have a great time, bring the kids. We have a lot of very young kids that come to this event. I
Hmm.
mean, it is fantastic. So that was the goal from the beginning, was how do we widen the net here and make it an environment that people want to come,
Yeah.
whether they're, not everybody needs to know what kind of spark plug is, in a, T33 Alpha, right?
Right.
So
Right. Well, it's interesting. Like you said, I mean, events like this can be so much more than just showing up. And like when we go to when I go to the track, we go to the track. I go to the track with my buddies. We have the car set up. We're in the paddock. We're racing. We've got our cooler there with some sandwiches and stuff like that, right? When you're talking about cars of this caliber, vintage cars, Ferraris, Maseratis, Bugattis, all these wonderful cars they have this kind of lore around them. If you're into racing, that's one thing to look at as an adult, as somebody who's kind of a racing fan. As a child, if it's the impression that these vehicles make. And basically you created for children this massive automotive carnival ride, right? That all
yep.
these little kids come in and their eyes turn the size of saucers, and they look at these cars and they look at the colors, they look at the shapes, they hear the sounds, they smell everything. And all of a sudden it's this visceral and auditory kind of experience for them that entrenches them in a way that nothing else does. And as an adult, I still turn into that same 4-year-old kid that gets excited when I go to events like this. Um, it's an impressive thing. Now, how difficult was it to convince these guys? Like, listen, I understand your car is $20 million, but you should really take it out of the track and abuse it. Or I should say abuse it. I'll say enjoy it. How's that?
Yeah, look, my view of these great cars, because we do have a lot of cars worth between, call it 20 and 50 or 60 million dollars,
Yeah,
which is a little bit astounding, right?
that's ridiculous. It's great. It's amazing.
But the reality is that most of those collectors, they love seeing their cars run. They
Yeah.
don't want to see them banged up, but they do want to see them run, and they want to see them run what we all describe as in anger.
Yeah.
And they've been fantastic. I will tell you, without fail. Now, the first event, that was a little, I wouldn't say problematic, but people scratched their head. The guys at the track that were running the track said, "You're crazy. What do you mean you're going to have good food? You know, and you're not going to
Right.
serve hot dogs, and you're going to put you're really going to put lawn out and white fences?" And so,
Yep.
so we said, yes, we are going to do that. And, you know, in the beginning, I was very hesitant to call a lot of these big collectors. Now I just call them up and I just say, look,
Yeah.
I need this car. You know, this is the 60th anniversary for McLaren or whatever. I need these
Right.
cars. And 99% of them say we are 100% in. And now some of them are just too rare to race, like the 300
Right.
SLR. Um, we did run it last year
Yep.
at
Yep.
Laguna, which was fantastic, and that was always great. And the first one we had the W194
Right.
Mercedes, and you know, these guys. First of all, I think they love showing their cars. But
Well,
but they're not going to bring it out. You know, no offense to a lot of the other cars, but a lot of the cars that race today aren't original. They weren't prepared in period.
right.
So, or prepared like they were in period. And we insist on race history. And it's also, we put invitational at the end for a reason.
Right.
We want great people. We
Yeah.
want women drivers. We want men driver. We want everybody, but you have to come and want to entertain the audience too. So that means sharing your car, letting a 8-year-old sit in your car. I mean, it's not going to hurt
Right.
your car. You know, it's a
No.
race car, for crying out loud. I mean,
Right.
so that's, you know, that's kind of been our goal.
Well, I always find it amusing because nobody in this hobby goes out and purchases. Now, again, the intrinsic value is high on a lot of these cars, but nobody purchases these vehicles and drives these vehicles and showcases these vehicles because they don't have personalities, meaning the individuals who own them, right? We own these cars, we drive these cars, we abuse these cars, we enjoy these cars. It's not because we're introverts, right? It's because they're extensions of who we are and what we like to do. What I find amazing is that when these cars are driven, and it's almost like this Jekyll and Hyde. The owners will go out and they'll look at the car. These are amazing and blah, 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 blah. As soon as they get on the racetrack, that switch flips. And you'll see lap 1 or 2, they're kind of pacing themselves. They're just kind of warming it up. Lap 3, all of a sudden, things start to change. Lap 4, lap 5, lap 6, these guys are hammering.
Yeah.
And to see these vintage cars come out of, like, you know, turn 1 at Laguna in, like, you know, out of the hairpin, somewhat of a 4-wheel slide, and then going up over the crest, it's at speed. These guys are not babying these cars. They are running them hard.
That's right. But that's the goal. I mean, the goal is to run them hard, but be safe, but to show the spectators how they would have run in period. So, as you know, there's a lot of great drivers out there bringing amazing cars, Cobras, and obviously Ferraris and all kinds of stuff. And the guys that run in the front, they are pretty aggressive. They
Oh,
are
yeah.
pretty darn aggressive
Yeah.
with some pretty spectacular machinery.
So how did you get into this? I mean, I heard that your dad was a car guy, and that is that true? And he kind of
Yeah,
got you into this?
yeah. I mean, I used to go to all the Trans Am races when I was a kid, the Can-Am races. I mean, I loved that. We would go to Laguna Seca or Sonoma. We never really had any race cars. He never actually raced. And then I just, gosh, I got to a point, I just said, like, I'm going to buy the dinky toy that I had played with as a kid. And it just happened that my first car was a Maserati 250F. And
Sure. Of course.
so
Good
people,
for you.
to this day, people think I'm an idiot. But that was my first race car. And then I learned how to drive it. And anyway, it's just been a total blast. So that's how I got in. And then I've added a few other cars, which I love the cars that won in those particular years.
Yeah.
They were always at the leading edge of technology. So whether if it was a Maserati Birdcage, it was the lightweight, tubular chassis that they built.
Yeah.
I also have a Parnelli Jones Trans Am car. Now that's not exactly a finesse car.
No, no. I'm a huge muscle car guy. I've got, a 69 Daytona. I've got an old Charger that I both run on the track for years. I get it. You have to, I always tell people, like, to drive these cars, you kind of got to get the most out of them. You got to beat them like they owe you money. Right?
That's
For lack of a
100%.
better phrase.
You're talking about the Trans Am cars. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. The Ferraris and they're more of a finesse car. But
Yeah.
I tell you, I'll tell you this funny story. Was the first time I had bought that car, I dreamt of having a Trans Am car since I was 10 years old and never thought I
Sure.
would ever get one. But anyway, I finally bought a 69 Parnelli Jones Boss 302. And I had been driving these Maseratis and Ferraris. And so the guys come out and we have it on the track for the first time. And I take it for 3 laps and I come in and the guys run up to the car and say, "What do you think?" I go, "This is a piece of shit."
Oh yeah, this is terrible. This is the worst thing I've ever driven.
And once you get involved with the cars, you're driving it with the gas pedal, basically.
Right.
And
Right.
it is just more fun than a barrel of monkeys. So yeah, so they're all, you take a Ferrari GTO, you take a Boss Mustang, they're opposite ends of the spectrum, but in
Right.
their own way, they are amazing cars.
So let me ask you this from a driver's perspective. When you get out of a vintage Ferrari and you get into something like a Boss 302, how does your perspective change on driving them? Can you be as, like you said, the Ferraris and the Maseratis are more of finesse cars? Can you still drive them as hard, or do you have to be careful of the mechanics? Are the mechanics more fragile? Because this is something that I was always, curious about. Are they more fragile, even though they're race cars, or can you still really kind of hammer them the way you would, say, a vintage American car?
We run them very, very hard. I would say you have to be a touch more delicate with the Italian cars historically.
Yeah.
Usually they're lighter, they do handle better, they're not as indestructible. But the Boss is, you can run that thing, you can run those things pretty much to the limit without getting into too much trouble.
Right.
But yeah, the difference is how you drive them though. You go from a very kind of a sweeping light touch to crazy. It's like, I describe it as getting out of a Tennessee Walker and getting on a Bronco Bull.
Yeah, so little bit of a difference there.
Correct. And I always love getting in different cars. So I'm never, a lot of guys say I'll only drive this kind of car, and I'll drive whatever. If it's got a wheel and a gas pedal, I'll drive it.
I feel the same way. So let me ask you, so it is an invitational event. What is the cutoff in age for the vehicles that attend your event?
This year it's 2012. So we're really trying.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So we want to, we're trying to bring a very broad group of cars to continue to entertain. But what we also see is that, younger generations, they get engaged with the newer technology. And we think that, so we need prototypes, we need GT cars.
Right.
In 2023, we'll probably actually push it even newer, because there's some amazing Le Mans cars out there that we think, it's not really about what cutoff makes it historic. To me, it's what cutoff makes it important. And whether that's technology or turbo hybrids or
Yeah,
power generation through braking or recharging. All of that technology, I think, is amazing for people to learn about. So we really, we've thought about it in pretty broad strokes. I mean, of course, we've got some really old stuff,
sure.
which a lot of the young people don't seem to be hugely interested. But once you get them to the track, if they come to see a 4GT, and they can also kind of walk down the aisle and they can see a methanol powered
Hmm.
supercharged 1938 engine made out of manganese.
Right.
It's very cool,
Right.
right? And it's just, how do we make sure that it's curated? And granted, I know a 12-year-old doesn't get up in the morning and say, I want to go see a 1938 Delage.
Right.
He wants to be on the corner of Ocean Avenue looking at the latest McLaren or the Spiker or the
Right.
Hennessy, or for example, we'll have Zingers and Hennessy's
Oh, sure.
at the track. And I mean, that technology is just astounding, right?
Yeah. Well, I think what's really interesting is that, a lot of the events are just vintage events, but the fact that you're going and you're kind of showcasing the evolution of the automobile and the evolution of the race car, I think is super, super important. Like you mentioned, we're getting into this phase where we're talking about um, electric hybrid cars, right? We're talking about vehicles, especially here in the state of California, where I feel like their entire mission in life is to axe the automobile, which kills me like on a daily basis.
The greatest place in
Um,
the world to drive them. Yeah, exactly.
it's just amazing to me, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like everything that we as car guys do, they're just like, we don't want you to do that anymore. It's like, do you understand what state this is? Do you understand the tracks and the history of hot rodding and the history of racing that it is located where we are? And sometimes it's like you want to grab the politicians by the neck and just do bad things. But the fact that you're showcasing that evolution of motorsport, the evolution of the automobile to this younger generation, and even the older generation, people that might not have thought they liked racing, to set up an event from a social perspective, from an experience perspective, that even if they might not love cars, it's a whole new way to experience cars. It's a whole new way to experience racing. The other part is the people that you have at the event, the access is really unparalleled, right? And that was another thing that kind of really took me by surprise. And you could walk up to anybody, you could ask them questions, you could see the cars, you could go near the cars, you could really kind of, get into the pits and snap those photos. They were just accessible, which is fantastic.
But that's a request that we make, right? Well, look, if you're going to bring a great car, whether it's you or the owner or the mechanic or what have you, we want people to be able to walk up. We want to be able to have a kind of an intimate look at that car and potentially the owner or the mechanic or the driver or whoever.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, that's why we call it the Invitational. I didn't want, it's not how big is my fancy trailer and I just happen to have
Right.
a viewing deck on the roof. To me, congratulations, I get it, you got it, but that's not how we're going to run this. And we want all the cars. And that was one of the, I mean, people looked at me like I was an idiot. I said, sorry, but you can't have your trailer in the middle of my yard.
That's right.
And some of them said, well, we're not coming. And I said, well, I guess you're not. And eventually they all came around and said, okay, we're coming. And we put the trailers where trailers should be. And we said, we curate it so that all the grids are lined up and everybody can be educated and see it.
Yeah.
And I mean, my gosh, we had golf carts and what have you. If a guy needed to take an engine out or move something
Sure.
around or run to get parts, we made it very easy for that. So um, anyway, so yeah, it's we want cars to be accessible. We want people to walk up, talk to them, touch them, look at
Yeah.
them. Um,
Right. So you've got the event at Laguna Seca this year, and it's been there for the last two. We've got some other amazing tracks in this country. Is this an event that you would want to see run in other parts of the country? Would you do something like this at a Road America, at like maybe a smaller scale at a Lime Rock or a Watkins Glen or something like that?
We 100% would do that. We need to build the base first,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
we're trying to do here in California. As you can imagine, this is a passion, not a business.
Hmm.
And so
I get it.
we're pushing through the passion side of it strongly on the theory that we're going to come out on the other side, and it will actually, my goal is break even. It's not to create a new enterprise. But I look, I think the opportunities here, and the answer is absolutely. Would we look at Road America or Road Atlanta or Lime? A lot of great tracks. I mean,
Sure.
even Montreal would be
Sure.
a very cool place to go do it. So the answer is yes. We get a lot of requests. Would you consider come talk to us about one of these events? And the answer is absolutely. There's a lot of cars in the Northeast too that, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a
Right.
big, as you know, it's a big deal hauling cars all the way across the United States. And,
Right.
the guys do it, and most of them have trailers, but we have thought about it. We need to get it a little more dialed in here. I think this year and next year will be kind of game changers where we, start to really take care of great sponsors. If you got great sponsors, if you got great spectators and great cars, then we'll get great sponsors. So it's
Um,
kind of a three-pronged approach here.
yeah.
You need great cars first. So we landed all the great cars. Then if you have the great cars, the spectators come, and if you've got the
Right.
spectators and a reasonable digital presence, then the sponsors follow.
So this event takes place somewhat on the heels of Pebble Beach. Pebble Beach was, early August. Was that strategic to do it like that? Or were you just saying, you know what, we'd like to have an event in the fall where the weather is pretty much, I mean, in Northern California, we know the weather is outstanding, right? At this time of year.
Yeah.
We don't have snow, which is one of the reasons that I left the East Coast, because I never see snow again. I could care less. But as opposed to doing kind of a springtime or a summer event, what was the reasoning behind that?
Well, we don't want to come on top of Reunion. I mean, it's obviously August is a big event, and we don't want to try to step on that. We want that to be successful too.
Yeah.
But we either pick the spring or the fall, and we pick the fall. We work it around the F1 schedule
Oh,
largely,
interesting. Okay.
because we want ultimately, we want more and more of the F1. We've got Zach from McLaren coming and bringing a bunch of
Mhm.
cars and drivers, and Mika Hakkinen and a couple other surprise drivers that will show up, which will be a ton of fun. But we're really trying to do that. There's the break in between Coda.
Yeah.
So we like being a couple of months out from August, or we want
Yeah.
to be a couple of months ahead. But in terms of car preparation, to get the cars that we want, we actually have to go talk to those guys and select them and tell them about a year or year and a half, preferably in advance, because a lot of these amazing cars, whether they're F1 or they're Can-Am cars or they're Formula 5000 or whatever,
Yeah.
they need to know now. They need to know now for next October.
So it does, do they really take that? I mean, obviously, scheduling like that, yes, I would think they have to know. But how long, for people that don't know, how long does a vintage car, a real vintage race car with pedigree, how long does that take to prep generally to get it ready for an event like this?
Well, it really depends on the car. Obviously, the earlier they are, generally simpler until something significant goes haywire. But
Yeah.
the cars, when we start talking about bringing prototypes, the Le Mans GT cars, now you're in this other realm of computers and all kinds of much more complicated engineering. So I would say anything after 1980 takes a bit more thought in advance,
Okay.
to get it to the track. And of course, those are the cars that, those are the newer cars that I think will be very appealing to newer generations.
Sure. And as somebody who runs the vintage cars like yourself, do you find that the technology has helped in you're maintaining these cars as far as being able to remanufacture parts if something breaks, and things of that nature, or on a race car, does everything still have to be as it was? Meaning, if a part was hand formed back in the day, does that part still have to be hand formed? God forbid something happens to it. Where, like, how much leeway can you give to keep that vehicle in its original state with the tech that we have?
I think you actually have to use newer technology when you're restoring these cars. So if
Okay.
there's a way to rebuild it, of course the steel technology, whether it's one of the valves or whatever, there is newer technology. The metal's better today, so we don't have a way to judge. We can't say go back and do it the way use that lousy metal that they used in 1938.
Right.
So we certainly allow that. The cars have to be, obviously they have to be original, the displacement has to be
Yeah.
original, et cetera. But one of the goals of Velocity is to bring young people into the sport so that they want to, do they want to be in a restoration shop? Do they want to be an engine builder? What do let's bring these people in and show them that there's a whole industry out there that they can have a blast with. So that's the idea. But I will tell you, when it comes to repairing some of these really, the older cars,
Yeah.
we're using print technology to recreate heads and all kinds of things. So I mean, it would be almost impossible to do that by hand today. So it's we're sort of bringing new technology to take care of old technology.
Yeah. I I think that's fantastic, and I think you're spot on by kind of showing the next generation how to kind of dive into this, right? Because I know, and I'm sure you do too, when you start to talk to today's fabricators and builders and whatnot, one of the largest problems that they're facing is finding younger people that want to do this, that want to get into fabrication and engine building and things like that. Um, Making them understand that, um, whether they want to apprentice as a millwright or an engine builder or something like that, it takes time. It is not an immediate gratification something, right? They don't just come out making X amount of dollars a year. They have
Nope.
to apprentice for years and years and years, and then maybe they'll be good enough to do this, right?
No,
Um,
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, it is. I mean, it's particularly the guys pounding fenders and doing the aluminum work or the. I mean, some of this engine work is very, very complicated. So yeah, no, that's exactly right. But I think the more people we can introduce, the more younger people or older. I mean, it's never probably too late to become an engine builder.
sure.
But the more people we can introduce to this, the more excitement around it. And then we want to direct them to opportunities, whether that's education. We'll have people on site that are involved in foundations that do nothing but educate young people in taking care of historic cars. And we'll have Miles Collier, who's been an amazing leader in that space, about how do we A, protect these beautiful cars, and then B, how do we make sure that there are people that can repair leather or
Right.
figure out how to get the right paint color and
Right.
all of those pieces. I mean, it's pretty cool what a lot of people are doing.
So the website is your website's pretty informative. Is that give people an idea of where they should go to find out about the event? Give people the dates of the event, because like we said, it's coming up in a couple of weeks. And anybody who's on the fence, I want to tell them, as somebody who's attended the event multiple times, if you can, you kind of need to, because I feel like it's becoming one of those bucket list items if you are into not only vintage racing, but cars as a whole. If you are into artwork as a whole, because that's what these cars are, they're rolling sculptures for the most part, right?
Yep. Yes.
Um, if you are into connecting with some of the nicest people in the industry and really getting unrivaled access, um, it really kind of, in my mind, it's almost at that point where it is that bucket list event. So tell everybody where they could find out information, where they could buy tickets to the event, and so on.
Great. Well, the website, Velocity Invitational, so www.velocityinvitational.com. There's a whole host of tickets, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There's a ton of information on there, various packages, everything from come for the day and just wander around to, super luxury event, suites and what have you. So we have all kinds of options. One thing I will say is that once people have come to the event, even if you don't have to be an absolute crazed car lover. You will be entertained, you'll be amused,
Right.
you'll enjoy the food, the wine, the cars. You'll see cars that you didn't expect to see. You'll see technology that you never expected to see, everything from electric cars to supercars to cars that were made on a printer, or the chassis was. So there's a little something. This year we're bringing a whole host of rally cars, 5 of the most famous
Nice.
rally cars we'll have there. So we'll have a very mixed bag. Of course, the McLaren will be there with spectacular historic Formula One cars, and we'll run all of them. And so there will be plenty to see. And I'll tell you one final note. Last year we had the beautiful 300 SLR, which is probably one of the 10 rarest cars in the world. A lot of people thought it was a replica because
I'm sure.
because you could have access to it. We didn't put ropes around it. You could walk up, you could stand behind it, you could take a picture of it, couldn't get in it, but you could be very, very, very close to these cars, which is it's really what it's all about.
Right.
They are race cars. They are race cars after all.
Right. Exactly. They're built for a purpose. What are the dates?
October 14, 15, 16, Laguna Seca.
Okay. So the event is coming up. Like I said, I would encourage everybody, one, to visit the website, two, also go online, go to YouTube, just type in Velocity Invitational and look at the videos. Like Jeff said, if you are an enthusiast of any kind, you will enjoy this. There is something for everybody. As a multiple attendee and somebody who will be there this year, same thing. I won't miss it. I think it's fantastic. Jeff, thank you for coming on the show. I'm looking forward to this, and I'm looking forward to see where it goes in the next 3 to 5 years, and how it evolves, and the new aspects that you incorporate into it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for the time. It's always fun. It's I get a big kick out of it. I mean, I remember the Hemmings magazine used to be on my, since I was 10 years old. That was always
it was a staple.
That was a staple when I was a youngster, and I would imagine that's mostly moved to digital now. But we appreciate the time today, and thank you very much. And we do look forward to what the next 5 years looks like, because I think it's going to be really fun, and we will continue to press on bringing just extraordinary cars that people just don't see.
That's fantastic. Well, again, Jeff, thank you for coming on. We're all looking forward to the event. Go to the website, people, buy tickets, attend the event. I promise you won't be disappointed. And that's it. Jeff,
awesome.
Again, thank you.
Thank you. See you in October.
Yes, you will.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.